For millennia, cities have been places where bright ideas spark. From the earliest riverside trading posts that turned into today's sprawling megacities in the digital global economy. Cities can create positive experiences for people, always connected by technology. And when connected places work well, it's good for people and the planet. But making a connected place succeed is hard. There's loads of stakeholders, businesses, regulators and community groups who want to be involved across every mode of transport, every type of building, the infrastructure that underpins them, and the data and digital platforms that connect them. All of this is needed to help people, communities, neighbourhoods and local businesses to prosper. Now, more than ever, we need our connected places to succeed. We are in a climate emergency. Rapid urbanisation means 3/4 of us will be living in a city by 2050. And new technologies are revolutionising the way we live, the way we work, and the way we travel, creating fantastic opportunities for innovation, jobs and growth. At Connected Places Catapult, we connect people, places and businesses for a future of sustainable growth and prosperity. We are the UK's innovation accelerator for cities, transport and place leadership. We are trusted across government, industry and academia. We bring cities together from across the world to connect new technologies, business models and investment opportunities. So join with us and be better connected for a future of sustainable growth and prosperity.
Hello and welcome to UK Authority Live with me, Helen Olsen-Bedford. Digital data and technology undeniably underpin modern public services today. They enable innovation and service delivery and, increasingly importantly, they help us to improve operational efficiency. However, buying innovative solutions and services, ones that break the mould, can be tough in the public sector. Does the new Procurement Act 2023, which comes into force in October, does that provide an opportunity to reimagine procurement, boost innovation and further transform public services? Today on UKA Live, we will be exploring how best to harness technology and procurement today and in the autumn to power innovation. What is the art of the possible? On my brilliant expert panel are Rikesh Shah, who is head of the Innovation Procurement Enablement Centre at the Connected Places Catapult, and formerly he was head of innovation at TfL, so think open data and the app ecosystem that has evolved around that. We're also joined by Katie Armstrong, who is Deputy Director for Digital Services at the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. And the third member of our panel is Carol Williams, who is Director of Transformation and Digital. She's also the CIRO at Walsall Council, and she's also a Societim Vice President. So as you can see, we have got a wealth and breadth of knowledge, experience, and all keen to share their learnings with you. So before we start, though, I'm afraid that due to technical issues, we unfortunately do not have the full recording of this discussion. In the missing section, which bizarrely is early on, we discussed what is innovation and what makes innovation quite so hard for the public sector, the answer to which essentially is the complexity and rigidity of public sector procurement processes, combined with a lack of capacity in procurement and technology teams, let alone overall, and of course not forgetting the sector's overall low appetite for risk. We will be recording a short podcast actually to catch up with those topics next month, but in the meantime, let's join the conversation where I'm asking Rikesh, how can we create a level playing field in public sector procurement for all suppliers, from both large to small, right from market engagement through to delivering change? Rikesh, over to you.
Thank you. So I'll give you some context. The public sector spends around £380 billion a year on procurement. And 23% of procurements receive one bid. And most sellers, whether they're corporates or startups, say the public sector is hard to innovate with. So we've clearly got a challenge, whoever you talk to. And this level playing field point is important because the first thing is, as I say, even when you're coming up with an idea or a problem, engage early. Don't just jump straight into a procurement or do things yourself. Engage early and see what ideas there are out there. And that means that you need to scout far and wide. Start looking for people that are outside your traditional supplier base and see what ideas they have. Then I think as you start thinking about the procurement documentation, just give it some context around a startup may not have a large bidding team. So the questions that you're asking at the SQ stage, are they really needed? Or are you just using the same old documents that you've had in the past? So this comes back to Carol's earlier point. What's the role of the commercial manager? Well, the commercial manager needs to be entrepreneurial and seek best value. It's not just about not getting sued or not getting challenged or etc. because that's a given. They should be doing that anyway. So I think that's the other point. The third point is, how do you make sure that a startup that's trying to work with the public sector, how are you making sure that translation role is working? Because they're not used to working with the public sector. So we all know that if you're trying to get a meeting internally, it might take 2 or 3 weeks. But if you say to the startup, we're ready to move forward, they'll be calling you that afternoon to say, are we ready? So how do we get that translation bit right? I think there's also an opportunity to get the tier ones to work closer with the startups. So how can the tier ones also stimulate their ecosystems to bring new different types of innovators in? And to turn this into an example, at Transport for London, we started with about 100 problem statements per year. And there were genuine problem statements where people were stuck and were saying, I don't know how to work through this. And then very quickly, my team would down select them to about 30. So 70 would have already failed on because 30 are the ones where the conditions for success are really good. And we think innovation can help. And then if we get that right, only 5 of those would actually add value and there'll be contracts that have been awarded. But my point here being is look at it from a portfolio point of view where failure is accepted and failure is fine. But then you're working through all the way from market engagement to doing some testing, building the evidence base to ultimately awarding a contract. But to award a contract, you've got to get the procurement bit right up front. And you've got to make sure it creates a level playing field. And then you've got to onboard it. You know, you don't succeeded after you've awarded the contract. You've then got to drive the change in the business to adopt it. So I think having that portfolio-led approach where you're curating the market rather than simply working with one type of supplier is really critical.
And so, Carol, this is exactly where I wanted to bring you in here on how easy is that for a local authority to do? You mentioned risk because actually, and you've also mentioned the lack of capacity on procurement teams. So, you know, how easy is it to work in that way for local authorities individually at the moment?
I think it would be a shift, a change for us. I think we do tend to just follow the way that we've worked previously. So I think it would require that clarity for both the services and the procurement teams to understand this new way of working. And I think if there's anything that we can do to help the SMEs to understand what life is like working with local government, maybe that would help them decide whether it is the kind of environment they want to get into or not. I was talking to an SME last week, and they were saying they thought the Procurement Act was really good, but being a small organisation, they didn't think they'd have the capacity to do lots of proofs of concepts and work in that kind of agile way because they haven't got a massive bid team. So I think Rakesh's point about making it as simple as possible for them to engage, but I wonder if there's something up front where we need to actually lay out the playing field and say a little bit about the rules that we play to that helps those SMEs decide whether they want to join in or not, because it could potentially use a lot of their capacity for what gain, and it might just turn them off engaging in the future.
That's a really interesting point, Carol, and I think that with the Procurement Act, let's move on to that now. There are huge advantages around being able to engage early, but that's a really good point that Carol's just made. are we making a level playing field and making it easier for SMEs to work? Or actually, how do they fund that upfront investment in time and work and resource? Because it's only the very big companies that can afford to do that. Rikesh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. You've got to make sure that you're not putting a business out of business, because there could be significant investment, particularly from a smaller company. So my view is clear on this: is if you're asking someone to do something for you, i.e., some R&D, some proof of concepts, you've got to pay them. Yeah, they're putting their time and effort into this, so you pay them. Now, clearly, £20,000 to a startup might mean much more than £20,000 to a corporate. But if a corporate's interested in it, they can bid for it as well. And then I think we need to get much better at making sure that after the R&D, things don't stop. If there is a good idea and it's worked, how does it scale? Because that's why they've invested their effort and time into this. They're not doing it for the £20,000. So I think this comes back to the procurement. And something that I've applied in the past is the innovative partnership procedure, where you go out with a problem statement, you provide some seed funding, you create a test bed environment, so it's a controlled environment, so you avoid any risk or limit any risk. But at the same time, if the idea is a good one and there's a business case, you can directly then award a contract. So we did that with a program called London Road Lab, which was to reduce the adverse impact of roadworks. And we awarded multi-million-pound contracts there to startups who are working directly with tier one suppliers on similar activity. So it can be done, but it requires that diligence, perseverance, but also that art of the possible, which is what are they doing that's different and how is it adding value? So yeah, that'd be my view.
I just want to a couple of quick questions. Dave Tarbert is saying, Rikesh, could you just repeat the total spend annually in the public sector and how many get a single bid? I think they were astonished at that. Could you?
Yeah, the number that was going around last year was 300 billion, but it's about 383 billion is what I've seen recently in the document, and it's 23% of contracts go to one bidder.
That really is quite astonishing, isn't it? That only one bidder. Katie, I mean, but having obviously running a procurement and having all these different tenders, someone's got to review them. I mean, it's a huge job. So having only one tender makes it more simple. But actually, is that what it's all set up for?
I completely agree. So there is a massive cost, and I think we've talked about that, particularly if you're running like an open tender. In terms of reviewing the documentation. So yes, I think that is a real burden on the internal digital teams. That's not exactly what you're saying, but like I think it is worth flagging that when we talk about procurement, that anything that can reduce that is good. However, if you only have one bid, I think that I would hope in some of those cases at least they pull the procurement, because you don't like I think in most cases you wouldn't want only one person to go for it, because then they're not in any way incentivized to give you a good offer, even assuming that they have met your brief. And so to go back to sort of like the questions that we were talking about in terms of overspecification, if you specify too much, firstly you're wasting time because you don't know what the future is going to be. At best you can just specify what you have at the moment and then what you think you will need, which is unlikely to be the case in my experience. That's what Agile says instead of a waterfall way of working. It says that change will happen, the market will change as well. So it sort of shocks me actually, as somebody who lives in apparently the amazing procurement wonderland of central government, which I still find really burdensome. But like in comparison, the world of local government seems to me to be crazily bad. So it absolutely is something that I would like to help out with. And then I was also like talking to people who have previously worked in local government, people who have worked in local government, and something that again I would consider to be sort of like a bog standard piece of advice, like try and ask for suppliers to include accessibility requirements, which is the law, into your specification. And and the person I was speaking to said, if you do that in certain markets, you'll get no bids. So you've just wasted all of your time. So basically, there's all these different kinds of factors that we need to influence so that people aren't spending too long doing a procurement. People aren't being offered something that they don't want but feel they have to accept, because otherwise we just have to go back out to procurement to market. But we're also getting a good thing.
Yeah, it doesn't work quite as it does it? Does the Procurement 2023 Act, does that bring us new opportunities, and what are those benefits? Rakesh, let's come to you first on that.
I think the first thing is it's creating a discussion and a debate, which is important, that we're talking about innovation, we're talking about procurement, and I think that needs to be front of mind. So we need to use this as an opportunity as to how do we use this as a catalyst to drive some change in local, regional, and central government. I think the second point is the transparency thing I quite like. You know, how do you show your pipeline in advance? I think that puts a bit of pressure on service owners and procurement specialists to say we need to be more transparent about what's coming up so the market can better plan how it might respond. I think the competitive flexible, actually the other one before coming to the competitive flexible procedure, is one big challenge for me is spend and that transparency on spend. And how do we get better at reporting what we're spending money on? So as a result, the market can know how much are we spending on not just technology and digital, but the subcomponents of it. So it knows where to invest its R&D efforts if there's more things coming up as part of the pipeline activity. I'm really excited by the competitive flexible procedure, which is a bit like the innovative partnership procedure, which will allow us to be much more iterative through multi-stage processes and ultimately contract award. So I think there are significant benefits, but we do fundamentally need to shift the mindset, and it's the culture. I don't think the process is the challenge. A lot of this we were allowed to do and unable to do before. Is how do we make sure that the service owner is working closely with the commercial manager that has the ear cover from the executive committee to say we need to be more innovative, we need to realise better value, and that means that we might get things wrong. And how do we do that with the market? That's where we need to invest a lot of our effort. So how do we drive change?
Carol, how do you, I mean, with a lack of, with a shortage of procurement resource and, shortage of staff all over actually in local government and shortage of money, how do we take advantage of some of those things of the Procurement Act? Is it mainly culture? Are the bits there that you can see that would be easy to take up, easier benefits?
I think it probably needs some champions to say we're going to try and work in a different way, and just reflecting back my own experience. We did a competitive dialogue about 4 years ago, and it was the first time we tried that kind of approach to procurement, and I don't think we've tried it since. So I think we do need that kind of procurement capability to excite and take advantage and advise, so that it's not just because as a service manager you might only procure something once every 10 years. So it's best that we get that support function to give us the options and to guide us. And I think it's that we need probably investment in, is getting our teams upskilled, or if we haven't got the capacity internally, how can we join together with other authorities and maybe do a combined or a regional approach? I think there's got to be some merit in doing that. We're looking at opportunities to upskill staff, but we're doing it primarily through apprenticeships and things like that. Well, a commercial manager is a skill that you probably need to buy in rather than train somebody up from scratch. So I think it comes back to the communication with others, how we can collaborate together and pool those resources together.
Katie, is the Procurement Act, the 23 Act, is that a subject of discussion? Do people know about it? Do people know that it might change? I mean, for example, you mentioned rolling application to frameworks. Well, that will become pretty standard.
level playing field, etc. Also, the most economically advantageous tender is not necessarily the one that you need to take. Are people talking about the opportunities that this might bring?
I would say, in all honesty, not yet. Like there is conversation around it, but when I was asking around ahead of doing this this talk, our procurement people in central government had basically just been given the guidance about what it would be. So it's still sort of like coming soon, but not quite soon enough, I think, for people to engage with. So yeah, so it is coming, but I think that because everybody has quite a lot on their plate, this is like the massive understatement of the call. It's not coming soon enough, I think, for people to be aware right now. But you mentioned something that if you're here from a local authority, the one thing that I would really like. The one thing I would say that you should take away from it is this point around the most economically advantageous tender, because I think that's the biggest, easiest change. I think there's so much that could be done, and I'm hoping that we in DLUC can be a part of encouraging the sector to work in a different sort of way. But I think there's a lot of pressure potentially, like assuming you get multiple bids, let's hope so. To choose the cheapest, rather based on the previous sort of like most economically advantageous tender, and the idea of saying actually there are other factors that are important, and I think that will help people in digital teams who understand, hopefully, like the different kinds of like what people are really saying underneath the veneer of what they seem to have said in a very glossy presentation. So telling your procurement teams that actually the Act says that other factors are important and we don't necessarily just need to take the cheapest price, I think is the biggest change.
Rikesh, what do you think is the biggest change? And also, any thoughts on the fact that we're still not talking about it in local government, and actually it offers huge opportunities. And as Carol says, if there's a way of looking at things across the sector as to who's doing what, and the combined purchasing power that could be put forward is huge. Why are we not going there at the moment?
So I think the first thing I would say is, people should go onto ipec.org.uk, where we're trying to create new tools, new products that helps, and particularly as the Act rolls out, which is now the 28th of October, that we can provide that counsel and that guidance. So I think that's the first thing. And also we're working very closely with a series of local authorities across the UK. And we're not for profit, we're funded by Innovate UK. So our driver is to make sure we drive the change. I think the other thing we need to do more of is we need to showcase all the good stuff that's already going on across local authorities and national bodies and regional bodies around innovation through procurement. Because I think we need to normalise this rather than it being the exception. And as commercial managers get more confident that other people are doing it, they'll do the same thing in their organisation. I agree with Katie about the not just being on price and cost. And I remember running a series of innovation challenges where we brought different ideas in, and it makes procurement colleagues feel really uncomfortable. You're comparing apples, pears, bananas, grapes, and strawberries, not just apples now, and that makes them feel uncomfortable. And I think then you're starting to measure. So in my case, we're measuring how does this product impact road safety? How does this product impact congestion and air quality? So suddenly now you're bringing different people into the evaluation process who are measuring it, who are trying to create a level way of measuring it, an equal way of measuring it. But suddenly it's taking up a lot of their time because they're doing some modelling on a piece of output that's come from the market that perhaps in the past would have just been based on cost. So they would have given a subjective view. So I think we now need to change the way we start, not just writing the specifications, but evaluate. And if we're evaluating it a different way, have we got the right resources lined up so we can actually bring people in? Otherwise, procurements will, again, unfortunately fail.
Carol, how do we reach it? Because it seems to be quite a sort of triumvirate of, you've got the procurement teams, you've got the technology teams, you've got the line of business people saying we want to transform the way we deliver the service. And you've also got the legal teams, actually. So there's more than a triumvirate. But how do we get all those people to work together nicely, productively, and to shift the culture into what you can do?
Mm. Oh, it's a big question.
It is. It is. I'm sorry, but
that's all right. I mean, I think a lot of it boils down to having clear plans, having the strategy that you know what you're trying to achieve, and how it just comes a bit back to, for me, talking more, sharing more, but about having those clear plans, because you are going to have competing priorities, you're going to have capacity issues. If we're taking the organisation on a change journey, then it's how we get our people to own that and really want to drive the change forward, can see the benefits. And I think that's where we're not particularly good at, is deriving the benefits that this change is going to deliver. I think, as you were just mentioning about bringing in other people and looking at the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, I think we do need to be more clear about what those benefits are, because interestingly, we're looking at the criteria, and there's some pressure internally in my organisation to say we've got to make cost a more prominent feature. But I think that kind of speaks to the fact that we are in such a pressured budgetary position, and we need to be clear that we are making savings. So it's sad in one respect that some of these large transformational projects take years to come to fruition, but we're constantly under the pressure to deliver something right here, right now. And that sometimes means that you don't always go for the optimum solution. So if there's only one bidder on the framework, we would be asking ourselves, have we got the time to do that work? And you've got to say, well, have you got to make the time, because you're not going to get the best supplier? It's a very difficult one, but for me, it's having that vision for the next 3 to 5 years, recognizing that we're going to go through this constant change cycle, being clear about what the priorities are and who do we need to work together to deliver those. And if it means bringing in resources from outside, whether the SMEs can give us that technical expertise, maybe to help deliver those tenders. I mean, it may preclude them for responding to that particular tender, but we know that we are short of those kind of transformational skills. So planning.
Yeah, Rikesh. No, I was going to say, Rikesh, where could IPEC help with that? I mean, because that's a really harsh reality that we haven't got the money to go to. We've got to find savings, and if savings are jammed tomorrow, it's going to be difficult to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of reflections for me. I don't think cost and quality has to be binary. It's not one or the other. There could be things out there that can also save you money, but also do it better. It might even do it faster. So I think that's something we should also think about, is how do we find that sweet spot? So that could be part of the criteria. I think the second thing is, going back to your earlier point on conditions, organizations are very silo. And I think what I try to do is I try to bring different people in from different parts of the organization and ask them to take their badge off. And if they took their badge off, we say, are we trying to solve this problem? And are we all on the same page that we are? Because if we're not, I'd rather hear about it now as opposed to 3 years into a procurement or 2 years into a procurement. And that meant that the sponsorship person was also around the table, the person that's providing the money, the head of business planning. And if you're doing that planning 2 or 3 years before a contract's due or a procurement's due, you're much more intelligent and you're ahead of the curve when you go out to procure. And I think it comes back to Carol's point. We've got to get better at planning, but it means planning and alignment needs to happen. And then if you think you can save £10 million on a particular contract, well, do that planning in advance and then say to the service owner, this is how much money you have. I'm not giving you the full budget. I'm giving you less. We think there's something out there that could actually save you money. So I think there's 2 points. It doesn't have to be binary. And secondly, internal alignment at a much earlier stage, and you can realize the benefits. And that's where IPEC can help. we can have those conversations with you to say, how do you best design innovation through procurement in your local authority or central government agency?
It's an interesting switch of the viewpoint on it. I mean, Katie, most of the projects, well, all of the projects that the local digital is looking at are innovation based. How does that, are these things are happening as they occur, or is there more long-term planning? Are you trying to get them to work as a long-term collaborative? How's that Future Council's research coming?
Both. So Future Council's research is finished, but that doesn't mean that research is finished. And yeah, in answer to your question, I would say both. There's a general election coming, as people may be aware, after local elections. And that could potentially change the landscape of local digital. So there's definitely a lot of strategic thinking that we're doing, but we're very aware that things could change, and so we'll want to be aligned with ministerial direction. But I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone to say that the local authority issue in terms of digital and technology, cyber resilience, is absolutely expected to continue to be something that whoever we get as our ministers, they'll still think is very important. And it's not an easy fix. I think if you've read any of the local GDS articles that have been coming out recently, people have different ideas about what is needed. We have different ideas as well, although some of them are the same, which just goes to show it's obviously not an easy solution. I think everybody working in local authorities would say it's not an easy solution. So if there's things that we see that are working, we absolutely want to publicize those and drill down if they're going to save people money. And also like provide that case study to incentivize other local authorities to accept the risk of doing something that feels different but has that grounding in other people's work. But there's also got to be a longer term plan which we are working on, with the caveat that obviously things could change.
Rikesh, what do you think on what Katie just said? And actually, this might be a good point to say to the audience. Actually, I know that IPEC, you're looking for case studies on innovation, technology-powered innovation. So if anybody would like to talk to Rikesh over this afterwards, I will afterwards be sending out to everybody the recording to catch up as well, but also the reports that both Rikesh and Katie have flagged, and also contact for Rikesh if you want to talk to them about becoming a case study, because I think the more we share, the more we highlight specific things and share them, the better, because that's part of the cultural change. So Rikesh, over to you on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I fully agree. It comes back to that earlier point. We've got to normalise this, that innovation through the market isn't just an ad hoc thing that a couple of people are doing, because more and more people are doing it. And whether it's continuous improvement, whether it's transformative, how are you driving that change in your organization, and what procurement procedures are you using? So let's do that, particularly into the run-up of the new act coming out. I think the other point I would add here is you don't always have to exchange money when it comes to procurement. It could also be data. It could also be other assets that you have. And what I mean by that is that Transport for London, we made a lot of our data open, and we measured its value, and every pound we invested, we got 130 back. There were 700 apps powered by TfL data, about 17,000 developers, and 42% of Londoners were using an app powered by that data. And the amount of data that was coming back around running our operations more effectively, around providing the right information at the right time, it really added value. So I think also let's think about that as, what other assets do you have that you can exchange? We could stimulate the market to come up with new ideas. So I think, but as I said earlier, go to ipec.org.uk. We definitely want to connect with you and hear about some of the things that you're doing.
We're nearly out of time. So actually, I'm going to just quickly ask you all for your final thoughts and recommendations on the art of the possible for innovation procurement, advice, thoughts. In fact, Carol, I'm going to come to you first. What should people be looking at now, apart from maybe actually they should be reading the opportunities of the 2023 New Procurement Act? They should be getting ready for that. So, Carol.
I would say don't underestimate local government. I think that we've got some really, really good people who work there. I think sometimes they're just shackled by policies and procedures. So if there's anything that we can do collectively to release those shackles, I think local government will fly. I didn't mention Socketim, and I just have a big plug for society and how we are working collaboratively. We want to showcase good examples to connect people and to help local authorities, well, the public sector in general, to work together effectively. So I think I welcome the opportunity. I think signposting to help and advice would be really helpful. And I think we just need to encourage our procurement teams to take advantage of the new ways of working.
I think perhaps we should all be cross-sharing as well, because it seems like that the Socketim members will be interested in the information that Rikesh has, and also obviously Katie's team is already talking to Socketim members, but maybe we need to have more virtuous sharing of everything. Katie, over to you.
Yes.
My biggest takeaway is try and persuade your procurement teams to allow you to do a more flexible procurement now, even before the Act has come into force. Don't spend too long defining requirements that then shackle you, because defining requirements isn't itself a value-adding piece of work. The work is the piece of work, and ideally you would have a chance to change what is going on once the contract is awarded, which I know isn't necessarily the case, but hopefully with the help of your procurement professionals you could work out something. Use case studies. So we talked about that as well, but do use that to try and de-risk that kind of approach.
Rikesh?
Yeah, 3 points for me. I think to the service owners, what problem is genuinely keeping you awake at night? And how do you go to the market with it? That's the first one. I think commercial managers, you could be a strategic enabler to your organization, to your region. How can you get to that top table and say, how can procurement be more entrepreneurial and create even more value than you already are? And I think the third one is innovation spend is happening all the time in local authorities, but sometimes it's called something else. How can we be more transparent and say, we're going to allocate 5% of our total budget to innovation spend, because we're already spending it somehow. And then we're going to be much more transparent as to what's working, what's not working, so the market can start investing some of its efforts to come up with new solutions.
Thank you very much. And we will be sending out all of the recordings and the links and the contact links, etc., and all the reports that have been mentioned. Katie, Rikesh, Carol, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts and advice. And before we go, just a quick mention of some upcoming events. And I don't know whether we can get that on screen, can we? Excellent. So we've got a couple of events coming up. We've got we're looking at digital skills, which is another. I think the common factor is the lack of time and capacity and resource that the public sector has at the moment. And then we've got our Integrating Digital Health and Care in May, and we also have Smart Places and Smart Communities in June. So hopefully you will be joining us for some of those. And thank you very much for joining us this morning.